I'm not sure what that is. As Gord said, I'm going to start out talking about aligning marketing with the voice o' customer. I'm part Irish, so I use voice o' customer. But I want to start out first with a story that talks about the importance of terminology and wording, because as marketers and advertisers, our business is about words. So this is a story. Pope Benedict sitting in the Vatican one day, he's realizing that all the scrolls that have been written, that the monks and the parishioners within the Catholic Church are using are copies of copies that were made a long time ago. And he has a series of monks that he says, I want you to go back down to the basement of the Vatican. I'm assuming the Vatican has a basement. I don't actually know. But for the purposes of this joke, let's assume that it does. And he says, I want you to go down to the basement. I want you to look at the original text and make sure we got everything right. So he has these 5 groups of monks. They go down to the basement of the Vatican. They're gone for a week. They're gone for 2 weeks. And the Pope says, I wonder what happened to those guys. So he decides to get up. He goes down to the basement. He goes to the room where all the old scrolls are kept, and all the monks were supposed to be transcribing all the original texts. And the monks are in this room, and they're crying. They're all sobbing. There's tears all over the place. There's books all over the floor. And he goes up to the lead monk, and he says, what happened? What's the problem? And the monk looks up at him. He has tears in his eyes, and he goes, the word was celebrate. It's very important to get the words right. There's a couple of, I'll explain later for those of you who didn't get it. Again, what I want to point out today is that there's so much complexity when it comes to, particularly in a large organization or in any sort of advertising organization, trying to get the voice of the customer aligned with the marketing organization. And there's so many opportunities now, given the technologies, and particularly given search and social media technologies, to unlock the voice of the customer and infuse that in all aspects of the marketing process. I would say the challenge right now and over the next 5 years, there's some real weaknesses in the ability of advertisers to be able to capitalize on this wonderful set of data that's available to us now. And I want to explore that and challenge some of the people in the room with some very specific actions about what we need to go and actually fix that. But I want to talk about some other cases first where there was significant misalignment between the voice of the customer and the advertising pitch. Maybe some of you have heard of some of these case studies before. One is very famous when Coca-Cola was launched in China. Does anybody know what Coca-Cola, the original translation in Chinese meant? It meant bite the wax tadpole. And so they had to go back and remarket the entire concept of Coca-Cola and have a slightly different way that they were articulating those words so that they could get the translation that essentially meant happiness of the mouth. There was another great example from Coors. They were launching a new campaign in Latin America where the idea was that they were saying, Coors will turn it loose. And that, in the way they did the translation, came out as suffer from diarrhea, which is also not exactly what I think they were trying to go for from a marketing standpoint. And one last example was from Electrolux. They were doing a new campaign where, again, they hadn't thought through how this was going to actually get translated and how this is going to be used from a marketing standpoint. And it came out as nothing sucks, like an Electrolux. Which may be true, literally. But so this is how voice of the customer traditionally has been developed by marketers and advertisers. Who here watches Mad Men? Great show. And if you ever see the famous two-way mirror where they do the panel and focus groups and all that fun stuff, you know, there's the interrogators on one side and the interrogated on the other. And this is how marketers and advertisers traditionally got the word of the customer, and they'd use this to infuse their taglines and think about the way they were going to position products and naming of products and things like that. But now it's very different. We have so much information. Does anybody here not have a social media listening platform within their organization? Does anybody here not have the ability or a team that's essentially going in and monitoring changes in trends of keyword usage, looking at web logs, all the standard ways that we, as search marketers, have traditionally tried to unlock the voice of the customer? Now, we've used it for a very selfish and specific purpose. Keyword lists. Make sure that we're aligning our keyword list from PPC SEO standpoint, making sure that we're trying to do good SEO by reflecting the voice of the customer. But this doesn't get out to the rest of the company. It's very hard to do that. The rest of the company hasn't yet, I would say, appreciated the value of all of this underlying data. And the data sources are becoming more and more numerous, and this is becoming more and more complex over time. Excuse me. What's hard about this? I'm going to coin a phrase that one of the organizations we work with, IBM, I want to make sure they have appropriate credit, that I thought made this very, very simple. We want to move marketing and voice of the customer marketing particularly from a concept of inside out to outside in. I'll go through a couple of examples in a second, but we've all struggled with this. I used to work at Hewlett-Packard, and we would launch products, and the marketing team would sit down, and we'd come up with a name and a concept. And we had very little ability to do outside research other than from our research department that would do competitive research, things like that. It was very hard, and so we'd come out with nomenclature that when we launched into the market, you would see it was not always in line with what the customers were using. Well, again, that is something that has to go away, obviously. So how do we infuse our organization by listening to the customer through all these social media programs that are essentially creating these 24/7 panels, replacing the old in-person panels, and infuse that across all of our marketing? How do we move from inside out to outside in? And this is the challenge. How do you do it at scale? Because that's tough. Almost every company that we work with as an organization has done this once or twice, but then trying to do it in 30 countries with every single campaign, with every single new web page that comes out, with everything that we're doing is very, very complicated. You know, there's a good example, and you have to teach your organizations to resist this urge, right? Which is we want to coin a phrase or coin a concept that's going to become a market definition concept, like our good friends at Kleenex. You know, it's not tissue paper, it's Kleenex. If you go to external keyword tool and you see how many people actually search on Kleenex versus tissue paper, it's very different. Alternative situation, this is a video conferencing room. If you were an organization looking to infuse your organization with better video conferencing technologies, you'd probably go and start doing your research by using video conferencing. It's a relatively well thought out term. And Cisco's in the process in a 4-year process right now of trying to brand the concept of telepresence. I went to Keyword Tool this morning. I mean, they've spent literally millions, if not tens of millions of dollars of trying to convince the world that video conferencing is really about telepresence because they want to coin that concept. I went this morning to Keyword Tool and just looked at the relative volumes. And every month, according to that product, 350,000 people search on the word video conferencing and only about 50,000 people search on the word telepresence. So they made some impact, but this is the challenge. We want to make sure we use the words of the customers to at least hit the top of the funnel and when people are doing their research, and then have our brands reflected when we have people at the appropriate point within the process. This is the current process, and I mean, this is an eye chart and you're not meant to read all of this, but this is what I see most organizations going through. We do research, we do persona development, and then we go and we try to figure out what people are talking about for each of these different subject areas. We'll go do some research, etc. There's all sorts of steps. It's very complicated. And then we have the following problem, which is that we have to fit it into the funnel, because our goal ultimately is to match content with customer intent at every single point in the buying funnel. And then ultimately I have to go and I have to do a next step, which is I have to match these keyword analyses and this voice of the customer analysis with the content that I actually have, and basically plot out where do I have the content, where do I not have the content matched with, where do I already optimize for those words versus where are the new voice of the customer words, and then this becomes my matrix for what I have to do, what I have to change, what I have to do. Oh yeah, and this has a completely different use case. And a video has a completely different use case. There's different words, there's different terminology. The voice of the customer data that we were talking about before that's now available to us from social media and from search, I would submit to you, this is not something ultimately that humans are going to be able to do at scale. And so what we have to do is change the paradigm of how our organizations use this information, and we have to build a ton of automation to automatically capture that information, automatically analyze that information, and then automatically deploy that information. Let me give you an example. First thing I would say is that if you look across the next 5 years, pages are going to get smarter. I'll give you an example. Gary Milner is here. I'm going to pick on Gary. He's from Lenovo. He's one of our clients, but I'm going to use his website just as an example. You go to Google and you see what people are ultimately searching on. They're searching on the word personal computer, desktop, laptop, PC, etc. And then I go to the Lenovo pages and I see what's ultimately optimized. This is a hypothetical situation just for illustrative purposes. And I see that the word personal computer is the thing that people are using predominantly. I want to be able to automatically update content, automatically deploy content in real time using the voice of the customer and be able to deploy that at scale. I need to make my pages smarter. And I ultimately need to not just use the Google keyword stream that's coming in, but I want to look at Twitter, I want to look at ComScore, I want to look at all these different data sources and divine from them. Is there a mismatch between the customer's intent and my content and how they're getting to that? And I don't think it's a reasonable hypothesis to suggest that humans are going to be able to do this at scale across multiple devices with many, many keywords in many, many countries. This will all have to be automated. Creative is going to have to get smarter as well. I'll give you a good example. One of the organizations that we have the privilege of working with is Sony Pictures Entertainment in Culver City, California. And we've been working on a project with them over the last 3 years, or last 2 years, to essentially make their content and their creative smarter. I'll give you an example. Last summer, did anybody here see the movie Salt with Angelina Jolie? Some of you saw it. It's a pretty good movie. Okay. Okay. No ratings now. You guys can tweet about your ratings of Salt. When they started marketing the movie, this is the original poster that they used on bus stops and in the movie theaters, etc. The idea was that when the film producers produced this movie, they were trying to hit a particular demographic with a particular image. This is a spy movie, and Angelina Jolie is in it. Well, you start monitoring how people are looking at the trailers on YouTube, you start monitoring the comments around the Buzz and the Cinemaphile blogs, and you see that, yeah, spy movie, yeah. Can we hear more about Angelina Jolie? Angelina Jolie, did I mention Angelina Jolie's in it? Until 4 weeks later, this is the poster. All those cops and spy looking things, gone, right? All the trailers were recut, all of the posters were recut, they were redistributed to emphasize one thing. This is a leading actress. Everybody wants to see her from the side, from the front, from the back, whatever, from the top, from the bottom. Nobody cares. Just get Angelina Jolie in the trailers. And as soon as those creative went out, you see immediate increase in the buzz and the conversation around the movie. Creative gets smarter because there's all this real-time feedback about the effectiveness of not only pages and creative, but every aspect of marketing. Ultimately, the goal is mesh customer intent with content. Now, like I said, specific action. What's the weak link in this process? It's the content management process within most organizations. And I will say specifically the content management system. I can't think of a company that our organization works with where you go to the organization and say, tell me about your content management system. And you don't, somebody reaches for a waste paper basket, you know, people start throwing things at each other. It's usually a disaster, if there's one. And usually there's 7 or 10 or 50. I used to work for Gartner Group, and I went to the Gartner Group website yesterday in preparation for this, and I typed in content management system / SEO. I got back exactly one result. So Gartner Group covers the CMS market extremely well. All of this real-time content ultimately has to be exposed through the systems that ultimately do the publication of content, just from a web perspective internally. And it's off the radar. Type in CMS systems and social media. Nothing. I say that's the weak link in the system. And I would say if everybody in this room goes back to their IT organization and says, we have to go have a real conversation about our content process and our content management system and the specific infrastructure that's used as that publication device. And if these guys aren't talking about how that system is going to allow us to bring in and access this information, mine this information, then auto-deploy it and auto-infuse it into our mobile campaigns, into our desktop campaigns, into our creative campaigns, into everything we do, you'll never solve the problem in any sort of scalable way. I don't see how you can do it. And I think that's the weak link. And I would suggest everybody go back and have that conversation with their organization. And by the way, that's my business idea for anybody here for the day. Build a CMS system, fully open, able to read social media and search engine marketing sources, has a rules engine in it that allows you to define what is important and what is not important, and then allow you to auto-deploy that and switch the job of everybody in this room from content creation and keyword development and trying to do this in a manual way to becoming the monitors of the social media data stream, which is far more rich and far more wealthy than anything we will be able to divine in the inside-out paradigm. Thank you.